Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer here with Ann-Elise Francis, back for the next episode of the PCDN Social Change Career Podcast livestream. This is season 15, episode 3. We're going to be talking about scaling change, careers, and impact and inclusion across emerging markets. I'll introduce Ann-Elise in a little bit, but for people who have not joined us before, this is a live stream. It goes generally for about an hour. We deeply enjoy hearing your comments, your feedback, and learning about people watching. So whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, please put in the comments a couple of words or bullet points about the work that you do, your questions, and we'll try to weave that throughout. This is one of, I think we're over 200 episodes. So you can go to PCDN Global/listen or any podcasting platform and find interviews with brilliant changemakers from over 30 countries, from impact investing, humanitarian relief, tech for social impact. So, and then 3 quick requests. If please follow Ann-Elise on LinkedIn, follow Rippleworks, which we'll talk about. If you like the podcast, the number one thing you can do for any podcaster is take 30 seconds to rate it, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or just share it. So please, whether it's this podcast or another one, and then please follow PCDN on our channels. So Ann-Elise, and this will be live as an audio episode by the end of the day today. So you can watch the video episode or the audio episode at the end of the day. Ann-Elise is an impact-driven leader, venture builder, and investor passionate about advancing financial inclusion and economic empowerment. With over a decade of experience scaling ventures and high-impact initiatives across Africa and Latin America, she specializes in operational strategy, market expansion, and investment readiness, helping ventures thrive in complex emerging markets. She has led growth, partnerships, and operations across financial services, health, and climate resilience, with a proven track record of securing multi-million-dollar investments and structuring high-value collaborations. She recently started, I think 6 months ago, a position at Rippleworks, which is, I think, one of the world's coolest social impact organizations, which we'll talk about, where she identifies and supports social ventures globally poised for scale. She previously worked for head of growth at Turaco. How do you pronounce it? Turaco or Turaco? Turaco, expanding inclusive insurance to over 1 million low-income customers. She also co-founded Lend Her Capital, an impact fund supporting African women entrepreneurs. She is also a 2023 Acumen Fund Fellow and has held key roles at AZA Finance, CAD Africa, Shona, and BPeace, driving SME growth and building high-impact ecosystems through strategic capital partnerships. We actually had the pleasure of meeting. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia. Ann-Elise is based in New York. And so she was here last month, I think end of August or beginning of September for our conference. So we actually did a great impact meetup. So anybody who happens to be based in Medellin, let us know, because we do have a great impact community here. And so Ann-Elise, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. And often we'll start with a question thinking back to your teenage years. Did you envision yourself? I mean, careers change all the time, but did you envision yourself working at this intersection of social impact, emerging markets, and startups, or did you envision yourself being an athlete, a doctor, or when did it first come to your mind that you wanted to work at this intersection?
I first wanted to be in the foreign service. That was the goal. So it was always at least an international work that I wanted to do, but the goal was always foreign service. And then I just think getting into university and understanding the social impact space a little bit more, that's kind of where I've shifted towards in my career. Yeah.
And in terms of undergrad or just work, can you talk about, did you focus on business or finance or communications?
Yeah. So I went to Loyola University in Maryland, in Baltimore, and I was in the cohort of the first graduate of what they call, I don't even know if they still have it, it's the same name, but it's called Global Studies. So it was their version of international relations. And the year I graduated, I think it was 8 of us. They got an endowment for that role or for that study program. And it was their version of international studies and kind of an interdisciplinary look at political science, economics, sociology, history. And because we were the first, we could kind of make it our own since we were the guinea pigs. And a lot of my work and my studies focused especially on Africa, more on the political and history side of Africa. So I actually thought for a long time I would move to Latin America because I was also a Spanish minor. And it's funny because I spent 10 years of my career in Africa and still doing work in Africa today. Yeah.
And can you talk about, I mean, the average age of our audience tends to be, and we have all different ages, but I'd say in general, 25 to 40. So we have some people in their 60s, some younger, but in terms of how you started building the career post undergrad, so obviously languages is incredibly important. But how did you find your first or second roles? And was it
Yeah.
internships, fellowships? You just moved to somewhere and found something?
Yeah. Um, I mean, right after I graduated in 2008, so I'm aging myself, which was not a great time to graduate. There were no jobs available. So I decided I'm going to go move to Bangkok and teach. I actually taught history in English for a year, and just wanted to explore. I never really thought I would be in Asia, and I just thought I'll just do this for a year and we'll see. And my first actual, what I call my big girl job, was at the Council on Foreign Relations. And I actually applied for an internship. And I think I was like the second runner up. I didn't end up getting the internship, but when I was leaving Bangkok and thinking, okay, now it's time to, really start, they had an entry level role and I applied, and their HR team remembered me, and I kind of went through the process and started out at the Council on Foreign Relations. And so was there for 2.5 years, almost 3 years, I believe. And that was just kind of a crash course in foreign policy and international relations, getting to really research and understand a lot of key issues, as well as starting to see like what are the things that get me really excited and what I care about. And a lot of that was, the meetings or the studies we were doing around women's empowerment, or financial inclusion, or work in emerging markets. And so I think that allowed me just to kind of get a sense of what is the things that I'm really interested in, the assignments that I was getting, what are the things that I was like, oh God, I don't want to do this, or ooh, I'm really excited to kind of dig into that. And was just kind of lucky to let that lead the rest of my career. Is it helpful if I do like a little overview of my career? Cool.
Yes.
So after Council on Foreign Relations, I joined the Business Council for Peace, an amazing organization. The way I always describe it is kind of a nonprofit a business advisory firm. So at the time, I joined as from New York, but Central America program manager. So they were working in Guatemala and El Salvador, and basically finding really high growth SMEs, and trying to match them with mentors. So maybe it's a bakery that needs an expert in operations or warehouse optimization, and really seeing how we could develop their business, and grow kind of the economy in that way. So that was a really interesting look into really getting into a business and what a business really needs. What are some of the scaling challenges that businesses, particularly women-owned businesses, are going through in emerging markets? And I did that for, I think, also 2.5 years, and then I started to feel like, oh, I really want to be in the market, in the country, because I was sitting in my seat in Lower Manhattan and kind of going in country once or twice a year, and didn't really feel connected to the work I was doing. And lucky enough, a friend of mine in the co-working space I was in at the time said, and she ran her organization in northern Uganda, said, hey, I'm actually applying to an accelerator that's based in Kampala that's hiring for a role that you're doing right now. And so I checked it out. And at the time, it was called Unreasonable East Africa. So if anyone knows about the Unreasonable Group, they had an office in Kampala that was running a business accelerator for social enterprises within the East African region. And I was like, I'll apply and let's see how it goes. And I got the role of running their mentorship and partnerships program. And yeah, moved to East Africa, moved to Kampala. I thought I would only be there for 6 months. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And ended up with the Unreasonable Group or East Africa for about a year, kind of running the accelerator programs and matching really high growth social enterprises with mentors, investors, strategic partners to help them, with pro bono advisory or marketing work. And then I was like, okay, I'm here, I'm on the ground, but I'm still not as close as I want to be. And then there was a really cool social enterprise that I had always heard about and was really interested in the work that they were doing, particularly with young girls who are out of school in Western Uganda. And a director role opened up, and met the team. Run by a husband and wife that are now family to me. And I moved 4 hours west to Western Uganda and ran the impact side of a commercial passion fruit farm, which is basically training out of school girls within the rural villages with agricultural training, but also life skills training as well. And that was probably one of the most profound experiences I've had of just being in passion fruit farms every day and working with young women. And just also the team that I was able to lead for a couple of years. And so that was my time in Uganda, which was about 3 years, and then decided, okay, I'm a city girl. I need to move back to a city, and then moved to Nairobi and wanted to do something totally different and not really at least impact forward. And I was really trying to understand scale operations and expansion in a different way, and joined a cross-border payments company as head of operations. So I was deputy to the COO, so running a lot of internal operations and doing a lot of change management work, a lot of work with our chief people officer of just culture building. And then that slowly grew into more external operations and market expansion of scaling things within particularly West Africa and doing a lot of partnerships since I had a partnerships background. And then I just kind of thought, I need to get back kind of to the heart of what I care about, which is really making sure that there's a deep social impact weaved into the work that I do, and joined an insurtech called Taraco. I was head of growth for almost 5 years, running growth strategy. So it was microinsurance, of selling insurance to farmers, lower income people through B2B partnerships, and then was wanting to take a break. And so if you're privileged to take a little bit of a career break and a reset and think about what you want the next phase of your life to be, I was able to do that and had been dabbling in investing. I've been an angel. I've been a part of syndicates. A couple of partners and I started a very small fund to support Kenyan women SMEs, and really wanted to move from more of the kind of operator role within a social enterprise or startup tech venture to a philanthropic funder, and really understand the decisions that are made. How does capital get allocated? Where is it getting allocated to? And be a part of those conversations. And was lucky enough to find this role at Rippleworks. So I joined Rippleworks about 6 months ago.
Amazing. So lots of questions. Obviously, Colombia, we have great passion fruit, maracuya. So I just want to go back to to passion fruit. So question across all your roles.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're different, from growth
Mm-hmm.
marketing to partnerships to working. And so are there certain core skills that have been critical across the roles, or kind of each role you come with the right attitude and learned? Because it's very different helping to
Yes.
young women to find pathways to employment or secure income in rural Uganda, to
Mm-hmm.
working for a startup that's growing across West Africa. So just
Yeah.
like, if you ever think about how much
Very
is
different.
natural aptitude, how much is skills, and how much carries across.
It's a mixture of both. I mean, I consider myself a generalist, and I think just having the background in startups or small nonprofits, BPs at the time, I think we were less than 10. So you just have to have the skill set of learn fast and fail fast, but kind of move forward. I think some through line skills or expertise is probably around operations. It's around a little bit of strategy work. It's around partnerships, and because partnerships can be for sales, but partnerships can be for investor or funder relations, and kind of what that means in terms of the writing skills that you need, the relationship account management skills that you need for that. I think those are kind of the three main ones, and obviously there has been kind of a through line, at least I think, around financial inclusion. So having the understanding of, a particular market. I think the market I know, or the region I know the best, or is Africa. And because of my work at BP's, a little bit of Latin America as well. But really understanding, what financial inclusion looks like, who people that are doing the similar work that you're doing, and really taking a look at their models to understand what's worked for them, how have they scaled. And I've just been really lucky to be able to have those conversations with people as I'm kind of working through a project or trying to scale somewhere, and just kind of do that peer learning in that way.
And going back to Turaco, so
Yeah,
you scaled to providing microinsurance, and can you just share a little bit more? What does that mean from a small business or a person perspective? Like, what was the gap in the market, and
sure.
how did you fill the need? And both from a financial perspective, but an impact perspective,
Yeah.
how did you balance that as a company?
So everywhere in the world, insurance penetration is quite low, and particularly in Africa, I think it's about under 1%, with, taking out South Africa and Ghana. But m- most of us have insurance because we're formally employed. The majority of Africa is not formally employed. So you're just trying to figure out, when a health emergency happens, how do you pull your community together? Are you taking loans to pay for that? Are you selling a productive asset, so that maybe your farming is not as productive or efficient anymore? And so there's really not a lot of means for how someone who is a farmer or a gig economy worker or a moto taxi driver to get affordable insurance, as well as most insurance policies, as we know, are 12-month policies. To be able to pay that upfront is not something that they can handle. And so what microinsurance does, what Turaco tries to do, and other players in the market, is try to, one, break up the financial payment of the premium payment into smaller chunks. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's a month. Um, and then trying to see, how do we reach that customer? Because B2C is quite hard. You have to have a lot of budget to do a marketing play. But this farmer, this gig economy worker, this motorcycle taxi driver already has, or is using a service that has a financial component to it. Maybe they're already with a neobanks or a digital lender, or maybe they are, whoever they are, the gig sales agent for, there's already a financial transaction. So what my role, and a couple of other people kind of in the leadership team, was, let's identify who those B2B partners could be, whether it's another tech company, or a fintech company, whether it's a bank, maybe it's a telco, and seeing, who is your customer base. Your customer base, maybe you're an ag tech company and you are wanting to, not only, you want to be the one-stop shop for your farmers for where they get their ag inputs, but also where they can get another financial service like a health insurance. Because again, as I mentioned, if maybe you're a farmer and something happens, a health emergency happens with your family, you might make the decision to sell a productive asset. And so then your yields are not going to be, as high that season, because you've had to make a decision of what you can do. So what my role would be was find, let's say, that ag tech that is working with tens of thousands of farmers, and let's see what the product is that we can bring to those farmers. A really low cost hospitalization plan, a really low cost life cover, to be able to help them when that financial shock happens, so it's not such a shock to their family. They don't have to make the decision of selling that productive asset. They don't have to make the decision of, one of their children's not going to go to school anymore. So figuring out what that product is, and figuring out the best price point for that product. And some of the products were under $1 a month. And when it's affordable and when people believe in it, because there's also an education component to it. When you're working with more lower income consumers that, one, might not know about insurance, but also they might also not trust insurance. So you have to really build that trusting relationship and do the educational work, not only at the point of sale, but throughout the life cycle journey. And making it an easy way for them to continue to pay for it. So again, in the example of maybe an ag tech that maybe they've taken a loan from for their inputs, we're going to bundle the insurance premium payment along with the loan. So that's what they're paying back as well. So trying to make something that is attractive, a need that will be met for them, that they feel that will be met for them. So doing a little bit of that educational work, and making it easy for them to pay in small bites so they feel like they're able to afford it.
Mhm. And can you tell? I mean, we in Colombia, where we live, there is a very powerful group of businesses, a conglomerate, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the insurance companies kind of controls a lot of the market. We're in Medina, so we just had a bunch of damage to our terrace and a lot of work for 2 months, and they reimbursed us. Um, can you talk a little bit about, so insurance? Some cultures it's very prevalent, other cultures it's not. There's also a lot of insurance scams. A
Yes.
lot of bad insurance companies. Can you talk about it from the business perspective, both in terms of where the capital from for Turaco, how much was venture angel, how much was impact focus, where maybe the returns didn't need to be as high as the impact, and then from the pricing perspective, your margins, how you made money off of clients, was it
Mm-hmm.
less, equal, greater than, and just in terms of like some of the business dynamics.
Sure. Okay, lots of questions in there. So, first, around like funding. When I had left Rocco, we had already raised the Series A, so had gotten to that stage. And that is a mixture. One, first, obviously starting out with angel investors in a pre-seed round, and then really getting into more VC and impact investors. So, one, trying to figure out, and I think anyone who's either fundraising or either from VC or impact or even funders, it's really figuring out funders who are ideally impact, or not, let me say it, values aligned. And so that could be a couple different things. It could be, and where's their expertise? Do they have expertise within the impact space and are thinking about, oh, we want to help this company that we see is scaling, but also has a really great social impact return? Great, that might be an investor that we want to look at. Or there's a VC investor that is going to be really great for business introductions for us as we think about, oh, we're going to be moving into Nigeria and we really need a lot of critical introduction in that space, or thinking about another market. So by the Series A round, it was institutional VC and impact investors that was working with Taraco. In terms of the more financial business side of the actual product itself. So one, most insurtechs are not the insurance company because it's a heavy capital to get that license, at least to start out with. And so Turaco started out more as a distributor, so working with licensed underwriters in the markets, which is interesting, could be your partners, but also competitors at the same time. So it depends on what the partnership could look like that you're going after. But really trying to think about, I mean, insurance at the end of the day is kind of a numbers game. It's a numbers game of how do you manage risk with larger pools of people, and it's also how do you manage margins with larger pools of people. So a lot of what our strategy was really looking at partnerships to go after that had a large consumer base of 50,000 or more, to be able to make it worth it. If we were going to charge, $2 plan a month, we had to be able to get enough premiums in so that if we were paying the claims, the loss ratios would be healthy. And I think one thing that Taraco really tries to do really well is making sure that, yes, it was impact forward, but really also looking at the business side of things and making sure there's healthy margins, because there might be some times where you have to do tough negotiations with the insurance companies about, hey, this customer really can't afford a $10 plan. They're a farmer in northern Nigeria. So, but if I come to the table with already an existing partnership with you and show you that, our business is healthy, I might be able to convince you to say, let's go from 10 to 6 and then see how that partnership goes. So yeah, there is definitely a heavy component of making sure that the focus still stays on that consumer that really won't have access to that type of insurance. I think by the time that I had left, the stat was 80% of a Taraco insurer or client that had Taraco insurance, this was their first insurance policy ever in their life. And I think the average age was probably in their 30s, and had a couple of children. So kind of a big product for them to have. And also because it's a big product for that person to have, you have to make sure the service delivery is just tight in terms of, one, how we sell it to them and making sure that they really understand the product and understand what they're buying, making sure that you remind people that they have this insurance cover, because you might forget, and then 2 months down the line something happens and you forget, but then you remember that it's our fault. So just kind of doing those reminders that you have this cover. If something happens, let us know, we're here for you. And really throughout the claims process, making sure that we're guiding that customer and making it kind of seamless and easy, as digital as possible. There's no paperwork that you need to go somewhere. If you're in a rural area somewhere, it's really just kind of WhatsApp or text to be able to kind of solve that. And so trying to think about all assets in terms of, one, what kind of funders or investors do we want to attract that we think will be helpful in the next journey for scale? Who are those B2B partnerships? Whether it is the insurer that we want to be distributing their products, or the fintech or that bank or the telco that we think has the right customer base that we can forge a partnership to sell to their customers. And then what is our relationship to the customers, and making sure that we're treating those customers with excellent service throughout.
Okay. Wonderful. So we have a bunch of people watching from Ethiopia today. So Dr. Meti, who works for a bank but does a lot of work on women's financial inclusion in ABL. And so please keep letting us know your questions and comments, and introduce yourselves on LinkedIn or YouTube. And Dr. Meti, if you have specific questions around women's financial inclusion. So there's a million different questions, but just a specific one, less than 2% of all venture capital goes to women-led founders, in the US. And so what are the numbers like in East or West Africa? Is it even worse? And then, in your work, at Taraco or at Unreasonable or anywhere else, like, how did you try to increase greater economic opportunity, obviously for women and girls, but in general?
Yeah, I mean, the stats that you gave is pretty similar, to be honest. I think in Africa, I think where I've done it the most is, one, my work at BP's. The entrepreneurs that we were working with, about 70% of those were women running SMEs. So really having programs that are focused on women who already have what we think are high growth businesses, and getting mentors behind them, getting that head of marketing to help them with their marketing strategy or help them figure out their finances, is super key and important, because they don't have that in-house expertise. So I definitely will say at BP's, obviously the accelerators that I've been a part of, and tried to do it most with the work that I was doing. One, I also still mentor a lot of particularly women entrepreneurs, and or people who've been in leadership positions as I have been, and just because I've been on the side of the table that has, one, written a lot of grants and had those pitch conversations with investors, and now I'm on the funding side of the seat, really understanding what people are looking for, and how to kind of craft your story, your messaging, and what to highlight. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of really amazing ventures that I can name off that are profitable right now, and they're not getting the amount of funding that their male counterparts are getting. And so there's a lot of biases in that way. And definitely when my partners and I were trying to raise the fund for Lend Her, yeah, I feel like we got a lot deeper questions that I feel like male counterparts that I knew that were trying to start a fund, I was like, they're not asking you guys this. But again, there's all these different dynamics of being a woman, of color. And so it is difficult, but I do think there are more groups, whether that be in more of an ecosystem play, or actual, let's say, funds that are thinking about how do we support women entrepreneurs? How do we, make sure that there is a percentage of our portfolio that is really dedicated to that? How do we make sure we're bringing on proximate leaders and kind of elevating them? And do they have access to, these type of networks? So, and that's something that I think Rippleworks is really trying to do really well, of really finding those proximate leaders, and obviously women leaders that are running amazing ventures.
Wonderful. So I put in a great resources, Ask the Angels. I review for them, and it's a
Mm.
group of, let's say, investors and others who they put a strong emphasis on women-led founder and women-led companies or women-founded. So you can check out their stuff. If you're a company, you could submit, and there's a whole review process. And
Yeah.
if you're if you're an entrepreneur or an investor, you can look and volunteer time to look over pitch decks. And there's lots of others.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, because there's been also, this is true in international development, which I worked in for a long time. I think it's changing localization, but there's, for a long time, it was like if you were, and I've consulted on projects, and often I'll say like, I'm not, and often I'm honest, but sometimes I need the paycheck, but I'm like, I'm not the right person for this. Like, yes, I know something, but like there's someone from the country or the neighboring country or the region who's going to be smarter, better, and have much more expertise. Oh, and can you talk a little bit in terms of the startup world in East or West Africa or Southern Africa? Because there has been some critique saying, like there are people from North America or Europe who move there and do startups and have a much easier time raising capital than people from Kenya or Nigeria. I mean, I think the dynamics are changing, but any
Yeah.
thoughts on that, both as a woman of color, but also someone from North America, but has also lived a lot in the region?
Ooh, that's an interesting topic. Um, I mean, I think the startup ecosystem in Africa is um, super interesting and super vibrant. I mean, there's a couple of core markets, obviously. I'm starting to even myself get more interested in some of the more underserved markets like Francophone. I don't speak French, and so I don't know how that's going to work, but I'm also really interested in where capital is not flowing. But yeah, you are correct. There are you see it in a place like Kenya, particularly, where there's a lot of really amazing startups, but they're not run by locals. And again, it is the world is full of biases, and it's also like where are your networks placed, and a lot of funding for African startups, while the dynamic is changing, still a lot comes from the US, a lot comes from Europe. And it's really around where do you have access to? So, does that Kenyan local founder who has a brilliant idea that one of the reasons it's brilliant, it's because it's a problem that he's lived in or she's lived in and really understands the dynamics of the market. However, do they have access to that investor in San Francisco? Do they have access to go to that conference? Do they have access to go and get a visa, actually, even to go to Europe and have those in-person conversations? So that's a lot where the dynamics come into play. And then there's also, I think people do business as well as fun things that they are familiar with or look familiar to them. And so yeah, I think it's changing a little bit. There's some really amazing funds in Africa that are really focused on smart innovations coming from the continent by people who are from there and really focused on African-led leaders. So you're seeing a lot more of that kind of rising up. And then there's a lot more, it depends on the market, but also investors and more so angels who, let's say in Kenya, a lot of more upper class people are investing in real estate, but now starting to think, oh, and getting a little bit of that sensitization of, okay, we can invest in this startup and kind of take that risk. So there's a little bit of, again, education in that sense of where is the local capital going towards, because there is a lot of capital in Africa, but it's more going to a more traditional type of investment, and people are starting to get a little bit more sensitized to taking this type of risk for sure.
Yeah, my wife Kathleen and I would do small scale angel investing through syndicates,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
she's more skeptical than I am, and it's mostly through AngelList, but some other platforms, and
yeah,
90% social impacts of fintech, ed tech, ag
yeah,
tech, and all sorts of interesting things. But often, I mean, I'll look. I mean, I'm a white guy, but I'll look and I'll be like, this founding team is like all white men, or like, and she'll often
yeah,
look and she'll be like, nope, good product, but it's like, a bunch of Silicon Valley dudes in their 20s, and she's like, where's the like, their
Yeah,
product or their service. So it is quite interesting in terms of where the capital. We've invested a whole bunch in Africa, Latin
yeah.
America, and there are amazing startups all over the world.
Yeah,
And if you
maybe
had to
just to,
think,
can I just highlight two
sure.
things that if people are interested to check out. One is an org called Women Who Build Africa, run by two of my friends who are amazing. And there's just a lot of support, especially around women in Africa and then in the tech scene. And they do a variety of different things, putting on a summit, linking women founders to investors. I've hopped into some of the people in their network to do some advisory meetings where they're thinking about investment readiness or market expansion. So Women Who Build Africa is a really cool resource that's really focused on women entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech space. A really cool syndicate that I'm a part of is, I'm always going to get the acronym wrong, Nairobi Business Angel Network, so
Mhm.
NIBAN. Um, Most people are based in Nairobi, which I was based for a long time, but really looking at startups throughout the whole continent. And so finding a syndicate where you can join, even at a small scale of maybe you have $1,000 to invest. Because again, it's people who are investors in their day job, but maybe their fund doesn't, maybe it's more private equity and not VC or impact, or people who are like, okay, I'm kind of curious about the market and want to kind of learn. And so it might be interesting if you are wanting to get a little bit of understanding of the investing space, is to find a syndicate within your country or your region where you can start kind of playing around with and seeing what kind of risk you're willing to take.
Mhm. Wonderful. And so for people who are not familiar with angel investing, let's say, not that this is not financial advice, everybody has to make their own decisions. But for people who are not familiar with angel investing, can you just explain what it is and the benefits of being an angel investor and the scary part and the risks? And again, if you're ever going to do angel investing, any kind of investing. I might teach on this, do your own research, but like, what does it
Yes.
mean and why is it cool and why is it not cool?
Um, I mean, I think angel investing is, you have to be willing, if you give money away, you have to be willing to not get it back. That's the
Mhm.
reality. And I think in the startup world, um, yeah, I mean, the return is gonna, it's a medium to long-term return. It's a couple of years. So if you're thinking that an angel investment into a startup, you're gonna get a return in 1 to 2 years, this is not the right thing for you. At least maybe not on the continent. I can't speak so well to the ecosystem in the US since I've really removed myself from that. But the way I find and the way that I look at angel investing is, one, it depends on what stage you're coming at, because sometimes you're investing, one, in the idea and you think you see potential, but sometimes you're just investing in the team. I've invested in things that I'm like, I don't know if I get this idea, but I trust this team to figure it out. I think they have the capability to refine this, and okay, I'm willing to give $1,000 and kind of be like, I hope I get this back at some point in time, but it's going to take a couple of years. So I think, one, as you think, if you're thinking about angel investing, think about the things that you are interested in, whether it's a sector, it's a region. If you will have a focus on, I really want to invest in women, I really want to invest in local leaders, I'm really curious about the health space and who's doing innovations there. Um, and then there's tons of either looking at what might be interesting to kind of familiarize yourself. There's tons of newsletters, there's tons of syndicates. Um, I think something, at least on the African continent, like following things like Tech Cabal is really interesting. That is highlighting emerging startups, just to kind of get that understanding, and then understanding, if you want to do angel investing, it might be helpful to join a syndicate. So that's basically where people kind of come together and are investing together. One, I think what's helpful, especially if you are new to angel investing, you're learning from each other. So I think what something like NIBAN is really great is that everyone is at a different level of what they bring to the table. Like I mentioned, there are people who are investors in there every day, so they ask a specific question that's more of a financial question. And even though I've done investing before, and we'll ask them of those financial questions. I always see myself as someone who's been more on the operation side. So I'm wanting to understand, okay, well, how does this product work? How is the user journey? And so it's really great to join a syndicate where you can be investing with people, but also learning alongside of like what are the things that I should be looking at, and then you make a decision of, okay, I'm willing to take a bet on this, but knowing I might not see any sort of return, maybe for 7 years or so,
or never.
or
Because
never. Most likely
just
never.
about
Most likely.
somebody. I mean, I've had things on paper that the valuation's amazing, and there's also
Yes.
dilution and all that stuff. But also,
Yes.
sometimes it's like you invest 1,000, you get $200 back, but sometimes
Yeah.
not. But but
Yeah.
you have to. The number one rule is like do your own research, and you have to be prepared to lose it all, and don't risk capital that you need. Like it's got to be
Yeah.
long term flexible.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit? I mean, ILO. This is going back like 10 years ago. The International Labor Organization came out with research on youth and employment. And this is
Mhm.
like this is like a decade ago. They said that the world needs to create 600 million new jobs just to keep youth on. This is pre-COVID, like,
Okay.
and so a
Oh,
little bit like there is this, like, I mean, there is like a strong emphasis on startup culture and entrepreneurship as maybe a way to address the challenge of unemployment and giving people livelihoods, but
sure.
also like there's also the issue of policy and taxes and public investment and just what not that you're an expert on all of
Mhm.
that, but any thoughts like what does it mean to work on the startup end and the entrepreneurship end, and is there too much of a hero worship of entrepreneurship as this potentially magic solution to a lot of the world's challenges?
Ooh, in some ways, yes. I mean,
Mhm.
not everyone should be an entrepreneur. It just doesn't. Not everyone has what it takes to be an. It's a really hard, and sometimes, especially unless you have a co-founding team, a lonely journey. A lot of no's before you get to a yes, and then you get up a lot of no's again. Um, I think there's, especially in the seat that I have of, doing investing, being a part of syndicates, now being at a funder, I will come across a lot of ventures where I just think, but they should just be partnering with this person. And so people kind of coming together, that might be doing entrepreneurship and really doing partnerships together, I think is something that needs to be happening more. Um, but yeah, I think, I mean, there's starting to be, not starting, but it feels like in the last couple of years, a little bit more emphasis around youth employment, especially within Africa, and organizations that are really focused on that, and focused on helping very, very early stage, high promising local entrepreneurs kind of see where they can get to on a scale strategy. But I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur. I have dabbled in it and I'm like, "Ooh, that's a lot of energy that I just don't have anymore, at least for the time being." And I've kind of chosen, okay, where can I support a really high promising venture? But I do think there's a little bit of hero worship of that. But it is, I think, when you look at certain countries and you see the unemployment rates, and there really are no jobs. So I think it is up to people to kind of make that decision of, okay, is there an actual problem that I could be solving? Because sometimes I don't think that people are thinking through that part of, they're like, okay, I'm there's no job, so I'm going to become an entrepreneur. But what are you selling? What's the value proposition? So really making sure that you think through that to make it one and enticing for whoever your customer is, but also trying to be attractive to an investor or even a bank. But I do think there's and I think at least within Africa, there's a little bit more policy development to make running a startup more attractive in terms of more attractive taxes and bringing in talent and things like that. But there's still a ways to go for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and welcome Judy from Kenya and Juliana from Canada. Again, please let us know your questions, comments, let us know where you're watching from. So a question on people who maybe work on the support end or the enabling environment,
Mhm.
because I've never written this article, and this is more in the peace building field, which I'm not as in that much, but I've done a lot of training and been part of a lot of trainings. And often I feel like whether it's a foundation or a donor or a bilateral, the response is there's a challenge, we should do a training. And I call it the training mafia. Like I've been part of it and I've been in
Yeah.
trainings.
Yeah.
So like, is there anything, I mean, obviously you can't speak across all sectors, but what, whether if you're trying to support entrepreneurs, I mean, is there something you wish that the enabling or the environment or ecosystem would do more? Like, do we need more training, or is it more investment, or is it technical
That's a good
support? Uh,
question. Um, I mean, the two that came to mind, one, if there's a training, I think, especially in the time that we're in right now with funding really kind of dwindling down, um, it's around crafting your story and the messaging, because that's really what's going to help you attract an investor. And especially, so one, there's that alone of really crafting your messaging about the work that you're doing, but also just like understanding like where the money is flowing to. I think a lot of local leaders don't really know that, and are not sure of how do I even pitch to, an investor out of DC or an investor out of London, because it might be different from what you're used to. So I think having a little bit of training around storytelling, messaging, and also just like the realities of what it looks like to be fundraising in this time, because it's a critical time for a lot of organizations. So I would say that. And then in kind of what Rippleworks does and has always led with is around the capacity building. So as much as I believe in funding organizations and giving them that capital to kind of reach the next growth trajectory, if you're not able to unlock some of the core operational challenges that you have because you don't have the expertise, you can't hire a consultant, then you're still going to get stuck. And so I think there's more investors, more funders, more ecosystem enablers or accelerators that should be focused on um, not just the beginning stages of the ideation and the business model, because obviously you need to have that tight, but like as you're starting to see traction, there's going to be operational challenges that you're going to be facing. How do we help you crack that, to really get to the next stage, and not just doing it in kind of like a consulting way, but how do we develop the capacity within your team to be able to solve this challenge not only today, but 6 months and 2 years down the line?
can you talk a little bit about what? Just one other question: when a founder comes to you, let's say in an individual capacity, not in your institutional
Sure.
role, because not every organization or startup should seek funding. There is this almost.
Mhm.
We used to work at. I mean, with PCN, we used to work out of a great co-working space in DC and Virginia called 1776. It was
Mhm.
amazing, and the measure of success. Obviously, you need to be profitable, but it used to be like,
Mhm.
are you getting investment or acquired? And we're tiny
Mhm.
PCN, like our impact grows, but we used to be like, is it enough just to survive and do something interesting? So
Yeah.
when someone comes to you like, do you have any thoughts like, yes, investment can be great if you have a capital intensive business, a hardware and AI software, but like, when is it a good idea maybe not to seek investment, or like, just like the counterbalance, because there
Yeah.
are downsides to taking investment.
Of course. I think it depends on the business model. Obviously, if you have a capital intensive business, you probably will need to seek some outside investment. I've told many people who I'm like, you're actually on a really great, obviously it's capital light, or yeah, capital less intensive. You're on a great trajectory. Like, let's see what we can do in terms of operational efficiency so that you actually don't need to take outside investment. Because as you mentioned, it's not always the best, because outside investment, depending upon what the terms are and how much equity they will take in the stake of your business, who's going to be on your board, is that person going to be values aligned with you, and maybe there might be a little bit mission drift. So there's always a lot of stuff that comes with taking external capital, but I think it really depends on the business model, to be honest, whether or not outside investment is needed, or are you able to where's the capital crunch coming from? Is it maybe if we make some changes on an operational sense, or um, is it that you're just lacking some introductions, and then that will kind of unlock a partnership and you'll get revenue and profits from there. So it really just depends on the business model for sure. But there have been people that um, have come to me just for a casual conversation, and maybe they think, oh, Ann-Elise knows, some investors. I would love to be connected. And I've actually said, I don't think you should be taking external investment right now. One, I don't think you're ready to take on, because it's a risk, and lose some of your equity. But I also think, hey, if we shifted or refined the model in this way, I think you might start seeing some revenue traction. Let's maybe play around with it in this, and then let's see, okay, if we can make some changes within 3 months, where that positions you. So yeah, it really depends on the business model, I would say.
Okay. And I did post, some of the companies we invested in. I mean, I have a couple of favorites. One is called Carbon Collective,
Okay.
which is particularly if you're, it's only US based for now, but if you are an individual who has investment or retirement, it is the best in the world, I think, at
Cool.
public
Okay.
markets, moving it towards ESG. And they also
Yeah.
do a lot of work with organization retirement plans. And then another one we invested in, which I like, is called SMBX, which does community bonds for local businesses, again, just in the US. But
Yeah.
there's all kind of, just wanted to mention those. So, can you talk a little bit about Rippleworks? Because both the origin story, it's hard, not everyone knows about it. I mean, I often
Mhm.
call you, I don't want to equate you with McKinsey, but I think like the McKinsey of social
Yeah.
impact,
Hmm.
but really doing amazing work around capacity building, investment, and leadership.
Yeah.
And both, what do you do? What is it like to work there? And then,
Mhm.
not to inundate your team with any requests, but like what type of startups or founders do you potentially support?
Sure. So just a background on Rippleworks, 10-year-old foundation, so still very early stage in its journey. And a little bit of the origin story about the why we do the work that we do, and especially the stage of the ventures that we tend to work with. When the founders were looking at the landscape and seeing where they could kind of come in and find the best, or give the best support rather, spoke to a lot of other funders, a lot of CEOs, and realized, there's a lot of support at the early side of the equation for accelerators doing and helping ventures or organizations with ideation and their business model. And also, all the way at the other end of the spectrum, there's already large established organizations that are being able to get a lot of large scale funding. But those organizations in the middle, what you want to call the missing middle, there's not as much support for them, and they tend to be at an inflection point in their growth journey, and they're trying to solve a lot of complex operational challenges. They're trying to figure out, what does scale look like when we 10x our team. They're trying to think about, okay, in order just to go 10x, we're going to need the funding. And so that's where Rippleworks tries to come in at that critical inflection point of a venture's journey. And so started out not as a traditional funder, not with money, really around the capacity building support. And so, what that could look like is supporting an organization that comes into our portfolio with, let's solve that core operational challenge. Maybe you are scale your roadmap is showing that you're going to be scaling really fast, and your team is going to go 10x. What does that actually mean from an org design perspective? And we don't even have an HR team. We're just kind of like, do we even have contracts? That sort of stuff. And so what we'll do is find that chief people officer to kind of plug into your team and play that coach model with you. So it's not consulting. I think there's a little bit of the difference in the McKinsey side, but it's really helping your team to build that capacity to be able to solve those challenges. So that expert plays kind of a coach for your team, in a project that might be 2 to 4 months. And so Rippleworks is amazing because it has a team called the expert engagement team that manages our network of experts, but also if there is a need for an expert that is not in our network, they will go out and find it for that venture. So that team is just amazing in the work that they do. So as I mentioned, one, helping organizations to build their operational capabilities, helping organizations to also build out their middle managers, because a lot of support that funders or investors give is to the CEO, the founder, and sometimes that doesn't trickle down and to their leadership development. And your middle managers, that layer is critical to the day-to-day operations. And so I'm sure you've seen it as well, Craig. Like you meet a venture year one, and then even 5, 7 years later, it's still the CEO who's doing all the work or leading a lot of the decisions. And that's not really, an org that's really primed for scale. So really trying to do a lot of leadership development for that middle manager belt of your organization. So doing a lot of workshops for that layer of your team. So that's around the capacity building, and then as well as obviously now funding. So we provide grants to nonprofits, debt to for profits, and I should mention, as I said, it's not organizations that are in pilot form. You have to have a proven product, service, program that you are running, and you're tracking your impact outcomes, because Rippleworks is an impact first organization. We want to know, great, you're working with farmers. What's the income increase that farmer has? Is it a transformational income increase? Is it 5% or is it 200%? I've just learned about a venture that is in our portfolio that has a 400% increase for farmers. So that is transformational to those farmers' lives. So those are the ventures that we're really seeking to work with. Like, they might be a unicorn, and they're working in mostly emerging markets. We are geographic agnostic and sector agnostic, which is fun and hard at the same time, because you're learning a lot of different models. You're understanding why is an investment coming to this space. You're understanding, okay, how are you working with governments and variety of different capacities. So that's what Rippleworks does. My role at Rippleworks is a part of the sourcing team. So the team that is kind of doing the pipeline development. So not only finding the ventures to bring in, whether that is through either going to a conference, meeting other investors. Sometimes someone hears what I do and they're pitching me right then and there. I'm like, okay, here's the process, fill out the form. But really also doing the critical assessment of that organization, and really understanding their business model, their vision for scale, what their impact outcomes are, and seeing, does that match our criteria of, one, are you scaling? Are you working with an underserved population? Do we believe your growth story, and seeing, can we bring you into the portfolio, and then kind of broadening into the different services that Rippleworks has. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Please do check out Rippleworks. And also, they are hiring for some roles. Don't contact Ann-Elise. And they also do have a great job board with about
Yes,
1,000
they
jobs
do.
of the
Yeah.
different. So you can just go to Rippleworks and there's join our team or join our ventures. So
Yes.
check those out. So last two questions quickly.
Sure.
So what are you learning these days? Anything you're learning. And then the second question, any book, podcast, or industry resource that you recommend, whether it's connected to impact or not? Like, actually, there's two parts of that. Where do you go to kind of stay informed, and anything that has nothing to do with work that just is occupying your brain in a good way?
Sure. So what I'm learning right now, or yeah, what I'm kind of, especially with Rippleworks, digging into is the education sector. So I don't really have experience in that sector. I've done a lot of work in ag. With my work with insurance, kind of dabbled in the health space, but education is not a sector that I have a lot of focus on. And one of the sectors that, even though we are sector agnostic, we know the best is the education sector, because of the ventures that we support. So I'm doing a lot of digging into different models, whether that is school readiness or early childhood development, just to get sharper and kind of bring those learnings back to the team as we think about tightening what we're thinking about in terms of transformational impact outcomes. So I feel like all I do now is read up on ventures around education, which is fun, throughout the world. And what am I reading in terms of just general, my own professional development, or what was the question?
It could be like, where do you go to stay informed about the industry? And is there anything, any book or movie or anything that has nothing to do with work that just is occupying your brain in a good way?
So where do I go to stay informed? I think just international development itself. Um, Being a part of like the DevX newsletter, I think is really good. A wide range of things. There's a I'm there's a I feel like a million Substacks that I get, and I'm now not remembering any of their names, but obviously people that I see that are doing great work in Africa. I'm trying to get back into the work that I've done in Latin America. So really understanding what does the social impact sector look like in Africa. I think some of the organizations that I mentioned, will have every now and then really great pieces around what they're seeing within, especially the startup ecosystem, particularly in Africa. Um, and what am I doing that's keeping my mind active? I think it's just actually keeping my body active. Rippleworks is a remote organization, which is amazing to have that type of role, but you're at a screen all day. And so when I can, get on a bike and do a spin class and get my body moving, that's really important to me, and get out. And I'm like, oh, people live in person. That's amazing, not just on Zoom. So I think when I don't have to be in front of a computer, I'm like, I got to be outside in nature in a spin class, get my body moving for sure.
Okay. So thank you so much for taking time out of the
Oh.
live audio podcast today. Please follow Ann-Elise. Please check out Rippleworks. Please check out PCN and the 200 other episodes. And thank you so much. And